Tornadoes are scary, life-threatening even. You may have heard the tales of the horrors of this giant wind vortex, but no amount of storytelling can truly prepare you for the raw, merciless terror that lives inside this spiraling wall of wind. And being in the eye of the storm, it is way more terrifying than words can express. It changes you in ways you can't imagine. So listen closely as I share my experience with you, as much as I can remember at least. It was the 18th of May. My cousin Rick and I had booked a flight to see the Broncos play the Cowboys. We'd been looking forward to it for months. It was the one thing we didn't agree on. Rick and I have always been close, practically brothers. We spend most of our time together. Maybe it's because we're the same age, or maybe it's just the way we see the world. Either way, we've always been drawn to the same things. We shared a love for heights, late-night movies, chocolate, aviation, brunettes, and football. But football teams? Not a chance. He swore by the Cowboys. I bled orange and blue. Now that both teams were set to compete, there was no way we were going to miss this match, not for anything in the world. Or so we thought. It was an early flight. We needed to get to Dallas before 11 a.m., check into our hotel, and make it to the stadium before kickoff at 1 p.m. As we sat at the airport waiting to board, we made a bet. Whoever's team lost would pay for dinner for a whole week. Crazy, I know. But that's just how it is with Rick and me. Not long after we placed our bets, the boarding announcement came over the speakers. We stood, grinning, and sealed the deal with a pinky swear, like we always did. Unfortunately, we couldn't sit together. We had both chosen window seats, neither of us willing to give it up. I guess having so much in common has its downsides too. As the plane took off, I kept my eyes locked on the bright blue sky. The view from up there was breathtaking. I mean, that was the whole point of fighting for the window seat, right? But the once joyous sky soon turned dark, barely 5 minutes later. The pilot's announcement came almost immediately, and it startled me. He warned us about a tornado nearby and assured everyone that he and the co-pilot were doing everything possible to avoid flying directly into it. I glanced over at Rick. His face was just as tense and worried as mine. The air hostess also came over to us, her voice calm but firm. She instructed us to fasten our seatbelts and remain seated. By the time I looked out the window again, the tornado had erupted into a full-blown twister on the ground, a massive churning column of fury tearing through the earth. Everything looked small from the sky where we were, except this towering black spiral. It was too huge not to notice. We circled the skies, hoping the tornado would disappear soon. I learned this in aviation school. Whenever there is inclement weather, pilots circle the area until it's safe to continue flying. We circled for about 10 minutes before the ride got bumpier. A sudden silence fell over the plane, but it was heavy with panic. I looked out the window, and it seemed like the tornado was drawing nearer. The sky kept getting darker, almost as if we were heading straight into it. It was unusual. The pilot was supposed to be avoiding the storm, not flying toward it. It almost felt like he was trying to get us all killed. I gripped my seat tightly and tried to get the flight attendant's attention, to have her check on the pilot or do something, but she was strapped into her seat. In that moment, I feared this might be the end. As I scanned the cabin, my eyes locked with Rick's. He looked much calmer than I expected, but before I could say anything to him, the back of the plane tore open, sending several passengers spiraling into the funnel-shaped cloud. For a split second, everything went dark and silent. Then came the screams, what was left of us crying out, nearly louder than the roaring storm. After swirling for what felt like forever, the tornado finally released us, almost as if it had catapulted us out of its centrifuge. I signaled to Rick. We had to act while the plane was still in the air. We were only halfway through aviation school, no real-life experience. But theoretically, we knew what to do to save whoever was left on board. With every ounce of strength, Rick and I pushed our way toward the cockpit, but we were no match for the wind crashing through the broken fuselage at that altitude. After a brutal struggle, we finally made it, and what we saw still haunts me to this day. A shard of metal was lodged deep in the co-pilot's abdomen. From the looks of it, debris from the tornado had breached the cockpit, nearly splitting him in half. The pilot was unconscious, slumped over the controls. It was likely he had passed out from the shock of seeing his co-pilot in such a gruesome state. I was starstruck for a moment, but we were running out of time. We needed to act quickly, or we were all going to die in the crash. I gently moved the pilot aside, gripped the yoke, and strapped myself in. The nose of the plane was dipping fast. I looked at Rick, fear tightening my chest, and shouted at the top of my lungs, "Make sure everyone is okay." He held my hand briefly, then turned and made his way back toward the passengers. Behind me, I heard screams, and especially the desperate cries of a little boy. I couldn't let them die. I had to find the courage. Flipping switches, I retracted partial flaps and worked to stabilize the throttle. The plane shuddered violently, but I managed to ease it out of the dive. The ground was no longer rushing up. We were leveled out, barely. Through the cracked windshield, I saw it. A narrow field between two lines of trees. No time to think, just act. With the landing gear and reverse thrusters gone, I guided the broken aircraft down. My heart pounded louder than the storm. I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst as the bottom of the plane struck the ground, skidding like a stone skipping across water. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't sure we'd made it. We were alive. I had landed the plane, at least what was left of it. I let out a sigh of relief and made my way back into the cabin. Rick had done a great job keeping the passengers calm. He still had his oxygen mask on and was holding the little boy whose cries I'd heard earlier. Together, we began helping people out of the wreckage, row by row. As we moved through the cabin, we noticed a woman sobbing. She was clutching her husband, who had passed out, his shirt stained with blood. We helped the woman get her husband off the plane, supporting his weight between us as gently as we could. Once he was outside, I rushed back in to look for the first aid box. I found it near the jump seat, tucked into a compartment beside one of the flight attendants. She was slumped over, motionless. Her oxygen mask dangled loosely by her side. She hadn't gotten it on in time. I dropped to my knees and checked her for a pulse. There it was, faint but steady. I closed my eyes and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. I opened the first aid kit and immediately fell into the rhythm of what we'd been taught. The flight attendant was slumped near the jump seat, her oxygen mask still hanging loose. I gently tilted her head, lifting her chin to open her airway. I slipped the mask over her face and secured the straps. A slow, shaky breath passed through her mouth. Still breathing, still here. Her pulse was faint but steady. I checked her for major injuries. Nothing life-threatening, just a bleeding cut on her temple. I cleaned it carefully, then pressed sterile gauze to the wound and taped it down. "Hang in there," I whispered, brushing a few strands of hair from her face. "We've got you." Behind me, I heard coughing. Another survivor. A man was staggering down the aisle, clutching his arm, his shirt soaked in blood. I moved quickly. "Sit here," I said, guiding him into an upright seat. "You're going to be all right." The cut was deep and messy, but I didn't hesitate. I cleaned the wound with antiseptic. Then I wrapped it tightly with gauze and taped it off. He gave me a shaky nod, breathing through the pain. Rick called out from the exit, helping someone else down from the cabin. I nodded to him and he nodded back. No words needed. As we tried calling for help, the sky had gone still. No birds, no wind, just silence. I turned slowly, scanning the horizon. And there it was. A dark coil forming in the distance, rising from the ground like a ghost, clawing its way back from the earth, a second funnel cloud. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Get low, stay away from the wreckage." The panic was instant, but we moved quickly. We helped those who couldn't move. A few hours ago, we were strangers. Now we were all we had. We had to protect each other like family. The wind picked up fast, howling this time. Debris flew past us, bits of insulation, scattered luggage, even a full seat tumbling through the air like it weighed nothing. The tornado was closer now, bigger than the first. We ran, crawled, and dragged each other toward what little shelter we could find. But we didn't all make it. The tornado had taken two sisters who weren't quick enough to get clear. I saw them reach for each other just before the wind took them. Gone in a blink. And then, just as suddenly as it came, it was gone. The sky stilled. The roar faded. I opened my eyes, coughing, shaking, half buried in mud. That was when we heard the scream. It was the mother of the little boy. The storm had vanished with her son. She couldn't hold on tightly enough. She fell to her knees, wailing into the broken sky. We tried to console her as best we could, but there were no words strong enough to fill that kind of silence. And then, in the distance, sirens. The ELT had triggered on impact, and the signal had gotten through. Less than an hour later, the emergency response team reached us. I watched as they attended to the injured first and came to check on the rest of us. We were taken to the hospital for a further checkup. It was a horrifying experience. Rick and I still talk about it. The experience was so traumatizing for him, he quit aviation school. I, on the other hand, am still skeptical about it. Above all, we were happy that we both made it.